Chapter 1. Every university has a convention of how they write their research work. And the University of Cape Coast has this convention believes that from undergrad up to master's level, you should have at least 5 chapters. You should have at least 7 chapters. But at the PhD level, it varies. And the variation comes because they are going to split the literature review into 2. And at the option of the candidates, you may decide to treat each of the objectives as a chapter when you reach the findings section. Or you may also decide to split it into 2. And your findings become 1 chapter. And then your discussion becomes another chapter before you go to the last chapter. So in the case of PhD, the number of chapters will vary, will differ. But it is not substantially or entirely different from that of the masters. But the difference is the content, what goes into it. I mean, it's also if you are doing PhD, it must be very strong. Yeah, because you must express a lot of maturity in your argument and your presentation. So the same standard for PhD writing is what I'm going to use for you. So after this, you should be able to write PhD project chapter 1. Masters, thesis or dissertation, you must be able to write a chapter 1. And also project work and equally article. Because article, you pick some aspect of the chapter 1 to build your introductory part or chapter. So that is what I want to teach you. So let's look at the basic structure of the chapter 1. So the chapter 1 begins with what we call background of the study. Background. So you must know the background of the study. You look at that. After your background, you may want to talk about your problem at hand. So statement of the problem. Statement of the problem. Then right after the statement of the problem, what being taken? Purpose. Yeah. That is for objectives. So you can check objectives or hypothesis, is that not it?
Yeah.
Depends on the style that you are using. Then the next one is what? Research.
Significant.
After the objectives, you have the research questions. That is when you use the objectives. Okay. Then we move to significance of the study. Significance of the study. After significance of the study, we will talk about the scope or delimitation. Okay. So after your significance of the study, you come and look at the delimitation. Some people also call it scope of the study. Scope of the study. Is it okay now? Okay. So with the delimitation, some people also call it scope of the study. After that, this is contestable. What I'm going to talk about, it is contestable. Some people say that you have to bring what we call your limitations. The limitations of the study at this session. But other people say that if you have not done the actual work, how are you able to foresee and know the limitations? But within a reasonable contemplation, it is obvious that some of the limitations of your research, you can easily see them before you even go into it. But the actual weaknesses in your studies are exposed whilst you are on the field. So this is contestable. So for me, I normally write this one as part of my last chapter.
Oh, okay.
Some also write it as part of the methodology session, where you are faced with the practical nature of how the study is being done or was conducted. Then after that, you come and tell us about definition of terms, because in the context of research, it's not, we can't take generic view of every concept, because some of the concepts must work to fit the context of the research. In Ghana, if you are doing a research, you want to measure gender, what comes into our mind is that there are two things that will come, male and what? Female. But in other contexts, LGBTQ plus, aside this one there. So you see, definition of gender or sex is context what? Bound. If you want to talk about issue like firm size, for instance, it depends on the industry. Some of the industries, they measure the size of the firm by the number of employees. Some by a combination of number of employees, your capital outlay, and return on investment. There are so many indicators. So when you are doing a research, sometimes it becomes necessary for you to operationalize your definitions to fit your context of the study. So we have what we call definition of terms. Definition. Is it definition or definition? And definition of terms. Good. Then, after that, you have to come and tell us how the entire structure of your research is. So that is the last session, which is what we call organization of the study.
So is this chapter 1, we can use it to represent the
proposal. Some of the aspects can go into proposal. It is not entirely.
Okay.
You will need some bit of summary of your methodology and some bit of empirical studies at the literature review level to add up to some of these aspects. It's not all these things that you also come to your proposal.
So this is the main work.
This is the main work. But so after you have understood all these things, if I tell you to pick some to form your proposal, you can. Your background, your problem statement, your objectives are significant elements that will be found in your proposal. We'll look at that. But if you understand all of them, writing a proposal is no problem.
Okay.
So we are going to take them one by one.
Should I write?
We are recording, but you can write your own notes as well.
Okay.
I think it makes sense, right? But some of the things you get them the way you write them. You remember the issue that we discussed about research phenomenon? Do you remember?
Yes.
I said that the intricacy of issues and concepts that goes on in the mind of the researcher, that you think that there are some associations. And that forms the foundation for doing the research. Because that will push you to look at the variables, you measure the variables, you get the data, right? So you can analyze the data so that you can make what we call verifiable evidence or statements. So your background is essentially anchored on the research phenomenon. Let's put it that way. So the background is anchored on the research phenomenon. Your background is anchored on your research phenomenon. And And we saw that the phenomenon talks about the intricacies of issues and concepts that work together. Okay, so, and the research phenomenon is also accurately captured by the conceptual framework. Remember?
Yeah.
The issues that we were thinking about surrounding the brain phenomenon are now translated into what we call conceptual framework. That gives a pictorial view about the issues that you are concerning yourself
You want to address.
Very good. The issues that you really want to address. So this is captured by the conceptual framework. Under certain contexts, they will not use the term contextual framework. They can use what we call model specification. Model specification. You look at that. So, whether we are using conceptual framework or we are using model specification, they mean the same thing, but except that they are being measured differently or they are being presented differently. If you use conceptual framework, it means that you are using pictorial views to talk about the interrelationship existing among the variables you want to address under the research phenomenon. If you are using model specification, you are using mathematical formulas to still illustrate the relationship that is existing between your variables. So, for instance, we have issues like cost function, total cost function. You have background in management or operations.
For me, they have background in education.
Okay. Okay, so let's look at if you want to total cost of production. Total cost. If you want to get to total cost, mathematically we can say that you need a total fixed cost plus total variable costs. This is the models that have been specified mathematically because these variables can be measured using numerical terms. You can estimate your total cost by looking at total fixed cost and then total variable cost. Once you put them together, it will help you to know your total cost. So that is a typical mathematical model expressing that kind of relationship. The same thing, if you are using your conceptual framework, we can say that total fixed cost